Welcome back to another bowl season episode of Locked In, where we provide football intel for the modern fan. I am the coach, Dr. Jeremy Locke, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Chance Rollins. Chance, I want to start tonight's show with a bold statement. Bowl games matter. It's easy to get caught up in the playoff drama. It happens to fans, the media. It even happens to coaches and players. Everybody wants to be in a better spot if they are not in the playoff. And we've seen that play out this year, and to great effect. And simply put, this is our current context in college football. Regardless, bowl games, no matter what size, still matter, and they matter because there's no greater shot in the arm to help a program get things moving in a positive direction for the long term than a bowl game, especially a bowl win.
Yeah, definitely. A bowl win really lets the team end their season on a really high note. They get some free things, some free goodies to bring home with them. They also get to practice for a whole extra month. They get to bring on them early enrollees from their previous recruiting class of the year, and they can come and practice with them. They can get better, and so does the whole team. They bond and they grow more, and it's really good for every team that gets to go to a bowl, whether they win or lose.
Yeah, and and the fans, the ones who are able to, they enjoy, getting to take the trip. Bowl games a vacation for everybody who can go, team included. And those of us who'll probably be sitting on the couch, we like to, we like to see them play for bragging rights, even if they don't know us. But the thing that gets me, I guess, in thinking about some of these earlier bowl games, um, it's really easy to make fun of the lower tier games because we've attached so much status to the big ones. And also, you hear the argument that since the conferences are the ones who collect and distribute the money to all their teams, it doesn't really matter if you make one or not because everybody's going to get some kind of a pay or some kind of a payday. And I really disagree with it. And the reason why is that when the team the team that you're competing against, not only on the field but also to get recruits, is playing in a bowl game on TV while you're sitting on the couch watching it, you've lost. No extra practice, no exposure. It is what it is. And,
Yeah,
I wanted to go back to what you mentioned about the early enrollees. Give us a little more, insight on why that matters.
Yeah, but I mean, you don't ever get to see the early enrollees throughout the season because you're also in your season. So, I mean, the only real time you have is to send other coaches and to watch film, but you get to see them in practice. They get to learn your plays. You get to see what they can do in your system. So it makes a huge difference, especially with the jump from the levels of high school to college. You really see what they're about and what they're made of in the bowl practices.
Yeah, and on top of that, we also see how great an impact that even a minor bowl win makes in the aftermath of UCLA's win in the LA Bowl. Like in a matter of one night, Chip Kelly goes from being on a flaming hot seat with people flying banners over top of the university calling for him to be fired to being a guest on Pat McAfee speaking like an expert on running a team in the era of NIL and the transfer portal.
Yeah, the winning does a lot for your team and it does a lot for you. It makes everything better, and I don't think anybody could disagree with that.
No, indeed. A bowl win for an up and coming program can change everything. Speaking of up and coming teams, Central Florida and Georgia Tech will face off Friday evening at 6:30 in the Gasparilla Bowl. What a name!
Hey, now we can't go any further without saying what's at stake here, okay? In the Gasparilla Bowl, which will be played at Raymond James Stadium, the winner gets a trophy of a treasure chest, which is inspired from Jose Gaspar, and he's a mythical pirate that the bowl's named after. So they'll get to win this in Florida, which is very tropical, and in Raymond James, there's a huge pirate ship there. So it'll be really ironic to see it all play out in the trophy presentation for whoever wins this game.
It'll be interesting. It's like, given this context, I wouldn't be surprised if the spirit of Mike Leach, the ultimate football pirate, lingers over the stadium, on Friday.
Yeah, if he does, he'll definitely see some offensive firepower.
All right, on that note, let's discuss what we can expect to see on the field from the Knights and the Yellow Jackets.
Yeah, one thing we won't see much of is defense. Tech comes into the game with a 111 or 118th ranked defense out of the 130 FBS teams that there are. And UCF ain't much better. They're only ranked 84th. And I think we can all be safe in saying that both teams will be able to score here.
Yeah, I mean, this may seem an odd turn, but this game has put defense on my mind, but not in the way that you might think. So let's get to my point by first looking at the Central Florida offense. Okay, the Knights have the fourth best rushing offense in FBS college football. They average 233 yards per game and have several ball carriers who can hurt a defense badly. Now listen to these stats. First off, running back R.J. Harvey, 211 carries, 1,297 yards, so definitely beyond 1,000 this year. A 6.2 average for the whole season, 16 touchdowns. That's a man. So Harvey is a strong back, runs violently, and he plays a bit of wildcat quarterback for them, though I think that with their starter in the lineup, you won't see that as much in the Gasparilla Bowl. He's backed up by a guy named Johnny Richardson, who is quite a running back in his own right. 84 carries, 557 yards, a 6.6 yard average per carry. He only scored one touchdown, but he's not really the red zone guy. What Richardson is a total burner. He's an explosive speed guy, and if the defense gives him half a yard, he'll take 10 more. I mean, just look at his yards per carry average. So we move from the running backs. John Reese Plumley, 91 carries. He's the quarterback, 473 yards, 5.2 average, 5 touchdowns. And anytime you got a quarterback with this kind of average, you know he can keep a defense honest with read keeps. And bear in mind that he put up these stats while missing 3 full games this season. So he's one to watch. Honestly, if he had that extra playing time, I wouldn't be surprised if he broke the 600, 700 yard mark and scored about 10 touchdowns on the ground. And finally, we have wide receiver Xavier Townsend, 15 carries for 163 yards and a 10.9, may as well say 11-yard average. Now, here's the deal with Townsend. While these 163 yards might not sound like much, in the face of nearly 3,000 total, they are a huge deal. So this 11-yard average indicates that he breaks a nice jet sweep run nearly every game. So like the 5-yard average at the quarterback position, a good jet sweep man keeps edge defenders outside and opens up the middle of the defense for the running backs and quarterbacks. And I think that you could say just the threat of Townsend on the jet and the threat of Plumley on the read keeps, that's what's really led to these 6-yard plus averages by Harvey and Richardson. So they are they're quite a crew to watch on offense running the football.
Yeah, I mean, that's some really good numbers. But what is really impressive is that while they had their 2,798 rushing yards, their passing yards exceeded that. They had 3,109. And I mean, that's an unbelievable balance. It's almost 50-50 right down the middle. And I mean, we honestly shouldn't even be surprised by it because Gus Malzahn, he's their head coach, and he's been running that heavy offense, that run heavy offense that manages to produce a lot of yards passing and running both ends of the spectrum.
Right.
And their leading receivers are Javon Baker and Kobe Hudson. They have over 20 yards per catch and 6 and 7 touchdown receptions, respectively, for each. If you consider these averages along with the rushing averages, UCF is good for a first down about every other play, which is unbelievable.
That's some kind of pace, honestly. And Central Florida's produced video game numbers, but I got a question for you. What would you say about all of this success on offense if I told you that the Knights compiled these stats without ever facing a defense that finished the season in the top 50 for total defense?
I'd say them numbers are about worthless.
Yeah, in some sense, I think that you got to say that they're at least weakened whenever you think this. Now, to give you a better idea of the competition that they faced or the defenses they faced, the average final total defensive ranking for the season of their 12 opponents was 85, so 85th. So that's well below the median ranking of 65, the 65th place in 130 teams in FBS. So that gives you some idea. And when you get to looking at the specifics, you'll see that there are some more weaknesses.
Yeah, if you look at their wins, you can see that they came out facing some terrible defenses. With Houston, they're ranked 113. Oklahoma State's at 120. Cincinnati's at 94. K-State was ranked 54th. And that was the best defense UCF faced this year. And they weren't even eclipsing 50.
Yeah. No, and that was also a double-digit loss for Central Florida. The Kansas State game was. Now, here's one thing, a side note I want to throw in, just, and I guess talking more about UCF's schedule. I'm really intrigued by their 18-16 win over Boise State, second week of the season. That's because Boise finished with the 71st total defense, so they're substantially better than Houston, Oklahoma State, and Cincinnati. But from what I saw watching them, I don't see them being able to keep UCF 13 points below their 32-point average. So if I were Georgia Tech, I would look at what Boise State did to Central Florida because something obviously worked. So speaking of Tech, let's flip to them for just a second. Now, the Jackets bring the 16th ranked rushing offense in the FBS into the Gasparilla Bowl, so they can run the ball too. They had 2,365 yards rushing and a 5.4 yard average as a team. Quite impressive. They also gained 2,784 passing yards. So they, like Central Florida, have a balanced offense. And finally, they averaged 31 points per game, just 1 point less than the Knights. So they have a quarterback, Haynes King, who's poised to become a household name around Atlanta and make a name for himself around the nation next season. He threw 26 touchdowns, rushed for 9 more, and had 648 yards on the ground for a 6-yard average.
Yeah, it really is. And what's even more impressive is they'll bring a good running back into the Gasparilla Bowl. They'll have Jamal Haynes, who actually rushed for 936 yards with a 6-yard average. He also added 7 touchdowns to that. And what's even better is that Tech will feature several receivers with double-digit averages. Chief among these is Eric Singleton Jr. Anyone who watched him in the Georgia game knows exactly what he does, and he has an insane knack for getting open on the sidelines, which does not look good for that shaky defense.
Right. So statistically speaking, Georgia Tech on offense is almost as impressive as Central Florida, right?
Yeah, it's about dead even. It's pretty close.
Okay. So humor me and answer the same question I posed earlier about the UCF offense. What would you say if I told you that Georgia Tech compiled these similar numbers while facing 5 opponents who finished the season in the top 30 for total defense?
That really makes me question why that everybody thinks that Georgia Tech is going to lose by a touchdown.
Yeah, and the thing too is if you do the same as I did for Central Florida, their opponent's average rank for total defense was 51. And that's a sight better than UCF's competition. Now, I'm interested to see how it plays out. And I'm not saying that Georgia Tech's schedule has made them a superior offense, but I am saying that their competition has forced them to become more creative than they would have been if they'd faced weaker defenses week in and week out. And I think that the game against Georgia proves that point. So the way Tech makes use of motion poses trouble for even the best defenses. And that's one of the real, calling cards of the Tech offense under Brent Key and company. So against Georgia, I wish I could draw this up just so people could see what I'm talking about a little better. They used jet motion to displace the inside linebackers toward the motion side. So if a wide receiver, typically the inside, the slot wide receiver, would go in motion to the other side, Georgia's inside linebackers will bump to the side that he's going to make sure that he's not going to be able to outflank the defense. And when they did this, they did it out of a formation that I would just typically would call wing trips. They have a wing back who is still waiting in his original position, say on the right-hand side of the line of scrimmage. And what they'll do is they will, it's not wing trips, it's actually opposite. And what they'll do is the running back, the wing kicks the backside defensive end, and the running back has the option of actually following the jet motion receiver as using him as a lead blocker if the inside is clogged. But if the outside is no good, he'll cut back, and he has that block for the wing opens up a gap that stretches from the play side B gap all the way back to the backside B gap. It gives him an exaggerated cutback lane dead in the middle of the formation, and it really helped them out against a very good Georgia defense. But that's not all that they do. They have more running plays that they try.
Yeah, the good thing they do is incorporating their quarterback on the motion-based power read and counter runs. While their current offense is clearly within the shotgun spread family, its use of moving parts in the game and the running game are oddly reminiscent of the older Paul Johnson option offense that they used to run years ago. I mean, it's really smart. It's like slippery offense that suits the players that they recruit there and that they can recruit there. especially having Big Brother there recruiting in state with them.
Sure. And the last thing I want to say is I think that Tech's play action passing game that that you see against Georgia, especially early on, you got to give Georgia credit because they figured out that Tech passing game and they shut Haynes King down after halftime. So good for them. But I think that what that they did against Georgia is really going to work against Central Florida, and I think that again, I think that they ought to check out some of the footage of earlier games because Kansas State carved Central Florida with intermediate passes off of run action, and it typically slants, crosses, things of that nature, stuff Georgia Tech likes to run. So I think they've got a good opportunity to throw the ball, and even more than that. I think they have a good opportunity to get their first bowl win since they beat Kentucky in the 2016 Tax Slayer Bowl. And that's been a long time ago. Now, there is one thing that we got to address before we close this thing out altogether. And it's something you mentioned earlier. It's the experts, and it's something that really intrigues me about this game.
Yeah, them quote unquote experts over at ESPN say that UCF has a 67% chance to beat Georgia Tech. And the spread they've put up is 4.5 points. So, I mean, I'm no genius here, but I mean, I don't honestly believe that. And I know some of y'all listening think that y'all might know more or know something. So why don't y'all go ahead, comment down below. What's your prediction? Give me a spread. Give me the score on the game. What do y'all think's going to happen?
Yeah, and I think that these teams, I think what we're seeing here, and maybe that just the optics of the ESPN 67 to 33%, chance of winning for each team. I think that what we're seeing is these teams are a lot more even. And I think whenever you start looking at even teams, the difference in competition is going to give the team who faced the better teams an edge. And I think that team's Georgia Tech. There's nothing in UCF's season that's remotely comparable to Tech's one touchdown loss to Georgia, a game in which their offense ran for over 200 yards and nearly 5 yards per carry against the 10th best defense in college football.
What's even more impressive about their 5 yards per carry is that Alabama, who is now in the playoffs and has one of the best run games that's been around for the past decade or so, they only ran the ball on average for 2.8 yards carry.
Yeah, uh, that's really hard to believe, really is. So, last question on this: what do you think's caused the analytics crew to favor UCF so heavily in the Gasparilla Bowl?
I mean, you got to be thinking it's because Haynes King threw 15 interceptions this season that they don't think that he can hold on to the ball and keep that possession.
Yeah, that is a lot of picks.
Yeah, I mean it is, but there is something that goes along with that, and it's how he threw them and who he threw them against. So if you look at it, 4 of his picks came against Clemson, and with the exception of the upset loss to Boston College, King's multiple pick games came against defenses ranked in the top 30 of the FBS. Out of the 130 teams, came in the top 30. And while the interceptions might be a high number, I don't think it's going to be as much of a factor as they might think it will be, especially since UCF isn't a top 30 defense.
Yeah, I think you're right. The defense is going to be a lot weaker than some of those they played earlier this year, and so I think that we can agree that we think that Georgia Tech will pull off what a lot of people are going to describe as an upset win, but that we're not really seeing as that much of an upset.
Yeah, I'd go right there with you on that one. And if I was an avid sports gambling enthusiast, I'd be betting on the Georgia Tech money line so I could make me some money this weekend.
Yeah, I don't think that's a bad idea. I'm not a betting man myself, but I do think that this is a game that is going to set some people up to make some money. And I would almost guarantee that there are plenty of people that are looking at the same things that we're looking at, and they might be willing to lay down, a small water, a large wad of money on this one. Overall, I mean, I think this is going to be a fun bowl game to watch. Coach Key down at Georgia Tech, that's an intense dude. I like him. I think he's got that program headed in the right direction, and they're an interesting bunch whenever they're winning. I mean, going to a Tech game is always it's an experience that a lot of people don't know much about, but it's pretty fun, and he seems to have them rocking. And I'm anxious to see what happens with them. By the same token, you have to know that Gus Malzahn, he wants to prove, he wants to prove something. He wants to prove that he's still got it, and this would be a good place to get that started. And so with this, we'll close out this episode. Tune in to ESPN Friday evening at 6:30 and watch what should be an exciting Gasparilla Bowl, and be ready for more bowl season episodes of this show in the next several days. Until then, stay locked in.